Hello, Umaru Cadogan here. I'm also known as the Danish food doctor. I work with health, nutrition, peak performance, and one of the areas I work in happens to be CrossFit nutrition, that is. I train some as well, but I actually advise some of the world's best CrossFitters, so people like Kristen Holte, and I also have lectured to and helped hundreds, in fact thousands of recreational CrossFitters. Now, one of the workouts that literally broke the camel's back for a lot of people in CrossFit Games 2015 was Murph. And Murph is on the menu again this year, so I thought I'd just share my thoughts on what you really have to think of in terms of, when it comes to Murph, what can you do to prepare, what can you do during Murph, and what can you do to recover as quickly as possible and be ready for the subsequent disciplines, whether you're a participant at CrossFit Games 2016 or you're going to do Murph at any other time. So Murph, of course, is pretty grueling. I mean, you run, and then you do a gazillion pull-ups with a weighted vest, then you do even more push-ups, and then even more squats, and then you run again. And if you're unfortunate, you might be running in hilly terrain or running stairs, running up and down, not just flat. So the most important thing you have to consider for Murph is hydration. You have to make sure you get enough liquids and that you're properly hydrated before and you get properly hydrated afterwards. And that cannot be stressed enough. With dehydration, it's okay to lose a bit of your body weight from sweat and you'll be fine, but once you go about 3% lower than what is your normal hydration status, that's going to interfere with your performance. You're going to lose about 5% of your performance, which is a lot at top level. And your ability to thermoregulate, that is to control your body temperature, is severely impaired. And therefore, you're going to have a really high risk of getting hyperthermia, so you overheat and literally get sunstroke. And if you look at last year at Games, that's what happened, or people were very close to getting sunstroke. And that's just the heat. I mean, then you add accumulated fatigue, you add the accumulated lactate, and so forth. So make sure you get enough water. Now, how much is that? Well, you should be as hydrated as you can beforehand. So one thing that's damn sure is at very best you can absorb about 1 liter of water per hour from your digestive system, right? And you're probably going to lose more than 1 liter of water during Murph. So if you're better hydrated beforehand, then you have a bit more to give. And then you have to make sure that you drink enough water during Murph. So you should aim for 1 liter of water per hour. And when you push that hard, even though you might feel thirsty, you can't really rely on external cues. So what you wish to drink, or if you just drink on demand when you feel like it, that might actually not give you enough water. So you should find some system of making sure that you're getting 1 liter of water per hour. Ideally, that would be 250 milliliters every 15 minutes. On top of that, if you can get hold of extra water and pour it onto yourself, that will be beneficial, because while you sweat to release heat. So when you sweat, right, what literally happens as the sweat evaporates is that heat leaves your body through your skin, goes into the water, heats the water sufficiently that you can actually have it evaporate and sweat. So the water that you get on the surface of your body helps facilitate getting rid of body heat. That's also why once you dehydrate more than 3% or so, your ability to thermoregulate is severely impaired. So also pour as much cold water as you can onto yourself during the workout, and especially your head. So one of the places where you can give off the most heat, one of the parts of your body where you're most efficient at getting rid of excess heat is actually your head. So the more cold water you can pour on top of your head during Murph, the better. And wearing a hat can be an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage would be that your head won't overheat, because if your brain gets too warm, right, that's one of the reasons you'll faint. On the other hand, also a hat can help protect your head from heating so much. So there's not an absolute or one right answer here. There are several possibilities. Now, what can actually make the water you drink more effective, so to speak, is if you've added some carbohydrates and some electrolytes. So carbohydrates and electrolytes, when added in the right amount, will actually help you absorb the water slightly faster. And theoretically the electrolytes might not help you get water from your digestive system into your body, but also from your body and from your bloodstream into your cells. So making sure that you actually, again, if you can, have water with you that's already been pre-mixed or that's placed, and therefore you can pick it up on the way. It's been pre-mixed with electrolytes and carbohydrates. So for carbohydrates, you want to get about 6% solution with glucose. You can also add a bit of fructose, in which case you can add an additional 3%. So you can get 9% carbohydrates in total. Anything beyond that will be uncomfortable. And I'd probably aim more for the 6% because when you do like a 6% glucose, 3% fructose solution of carbohydrates, people usually tend to burp and get a bit of gas. And so if you're going to do lots of push-ups when you're already pushing yourself hard, and also pull-ups, even though they're kipping, then that might get you even more queasy. But add some carbs and really make sure you get electrolytes. You're not likely to become deficient in electrolytes, even in Murph. That's probably not enough to make sure that you lose so much sodium and chloride and potassium through your skin that you'll get an electrolyte, insufficiency, or you will be clinically low on electrolytes. But they seem to help you absorb water faster, both from your digestive tract and possibly move it into your cells faster, so you get better cellular hydration, which you also want. Therefore, that would be really good. And of course, rather than mixing an electrolyte drink, coconut water is good. Maybe not absolutely perfect, but it contains electrolytes and it also contains some sugars. So coconut water with a bit extra added glucose might actually be the way to go, or might be one of several ways to go. Now, the other nice thing, if you add carbohydrates when you're doing something like Murph, the effects will be twofold. First of all, when you do Murph, right, lots of movement, so you will be burning glucose and carbohydrates. You're going to empty your glycogen stores, or at least use a lot of glycogen from your muscles. So if you add carbohydrates whilst you're going, even if you fill your glycogen stores to the max before an event like Murph, and you then you go at it, and it takes an hour or less than an hour or more than an hour or several hours depending on your fitness level, probably not several hours when we're looking at games athletes, then you will definitely, if not completely empty glycogen stores, you're going to use a lot of glycogen. And remember that when you do go at high intensity, fat only gets you so far. So fat is an energy source when you're doing high intensity endurance exercise or repeated movements. It's a slower energy source than carbs. So you will use fats during Murph, but fat's a bit slower. At a certain oxygen saturation in your body, the rate at which you can use fat is about 10% lower. So literally it costs you 10% more oxygen to use fat as efficiently as carbohydrates. And therefore, making sure that you extend the time where you have the maximum amount of carbohydrates available will be good, because otherwise you will sort of hit the wall. And you can do that by getting liquid carbohydrates whilst you're going. So if you get 250 mils of a mixture with water, electrolytes and carbohydrates, somewhere between 6 and 9% solution, that will help deliver more high octane, really fast fuel that you can use, and that will make you more likely to succeed. Now, the other thing with carbohydrates is that when you get something sweet whilst you're going, that also seems to have an effect on performance. So studies have been done on people being allowed not to drink their carb drinks when they're running and things like that, but just taste them and spit them out. And so there seems to be something happening when you get the taste of sweetness just in your mouth. That seems to extend the time before you hit central fatigue, which is the part of fatigue that has nothing to do with energy availability or lactate accumulation or ammonia accumulation or not complete, but massive depletion of ATP in your muscles, or a lack of water or lack of oxygen, but because your central nervous system says, well, I'm done, can't take any more, I'm going to put you to rest now, to sleep. So something sweet actually seems to help. So that would be a really good idea. And then the moment you're finished, get in the shade, right, with thermoregulation. Even better, the faster you can get into an ice bath and get cold, good. And if you're wearing a black vest and black clothes, get rid of that. And again, pour lots of water onto yourself, so that will help you thermoregulate more efficiently. So those would be the things to consider in the race. Now, if you're doing Murph and for games or for any other CrossFit competition where you have more workouts, more disciplines to do afterwards, you also want to make sure that you refuel your depot, right? You want to refuel your glycogen stores, and therefore you have to start eating carbohydrates pretty damn fast afterwards. Now, if you do Murph and it's not until 48 hours or 72 hours later you have to do your next workout or discipline, then you don't have to worry about supplementing with carbohydrates, but you just eat foods with carbohydrates. But here, because you need to really fill up your glycogen stores quickly, it's a really good idea to start getting carbohydrates immediately afterwards, whether it's some sort of carbohydrate product, liquid, or honey mixed with water. Eat lots of bananas. And you should be aiming for supplementing with 1 gram of carbohydrates per kilogram of muscle weight, or of body weight per hour. So if you were an 80 kilogram athlete, in the hours following Murph, you should be getting 80 grams of carbs every single hour. Or, you won't be able to drink all of those because of if you have them in solution, but then also eat some. And a protein supplement, a protein shake might be good. Not that it will help you directly regenerate glycogen, although you can see if you get protein with carbohydrates, that seems to shift more of the carbohydrates into glycogen storage. So a protein shake would be good, and it might also help deal with the central fatigue, that sort of where you're feeling totally knocked out, and also would probably be good because there's going to be muscle damage and tissue, structural damage, so you want enough protein to offset that. So that would be beneficial. And if you have another event a couple of hours later, it actually seems that caffeine will help you refuel your glycogen stores faster. So caffeine, it can push more glycogen into your muscles than they can contain at their max, but it might make it happen a bit faster. Therefore, you can use caffeine strategically to make sure that the carbs you eat are shifted into glycogen storage a bit faster. Again, this is only an option I would choose if I knew that I had another discipline later in the day. So if you have Murph early and then you have something in the afternoon, then caffeine post-Murph might be an idea along with the carbs to make sure that you are better at refueling your glycogen stores and depots in the body, because there's such a short time in between you're done with Murph and the next discipline. Otherwise, I wouldn't. So if it's in the evening, I wouldn't use caffeine because it will interfere with sleep and that part of recovery. Then you just have to eat a damn lot of carbs and food in general to restock and refuel. Now, speaking of electrolytes, you might also want extra magnesium, because like magnesium is talked about. Magnesium for muscle cramping is pretty important, and you lose a lot of magnesium when you sweat as well. The other interesting thing about magnesium is that it can help you become better at regulating the stress response. Not saying, oh, if you're highly stressed, just eat magnesium and you will be in Zen. But when you look at some of the physiological parts of the stress response, and you definitely want it going all out whilst you're doing Murph, that's what's going to keep you going, push you through the bound, push you through when you hit the wall and things like that. But afterwards, you'd like your stress levels to drop so you can recover fast, especially mentally and neurologically. And magnesium might help you do that. So you could consider magnesium supplementation post-Murph, maybe pre-Murph as well. And the other thing that you could consider, and this is more conjecture, I'd say I've anecdotally, for myself and from the athletes I work with, I've seen this work, but we don't have human studies, but vitamin C could be of interest. Why? Well, studies done mainly on animals, but there are also some human studies on vitamin C, show that if you give people relatively high levels of vitamin C, more than you can eat, that seems to enable you to produce more stress hormones whilst you have to do it, whilst you're performing, whilst you're fighting, struggling, and then seems to give you a faster return to normal levels of stress afterwards. So the seminal studies have been done on test animals, mice and rats. So you do this swim test where they're left to swim until they give up. And then you save them last moment. Of course, they don't know that they won't drown, but they literally think they're going to drown, and they keep on going until they can't go any longer. And then either because they're physically exhausted or mentally they tap out. And if you give them vitamin C in their feed leading up to the experiment and afterwards, they, in a best case scenario, actually can go for an additional 30%. So they can go for a third longer before they tap out physically. And then afterwards, when you look at how quickly will the stress response be attenuated, and that's what you want post-workout, post-competition, right? You want the stress levels to go down so you recover faster and you can relax better. That seems to be about a third faster as well. So although there are some studies showing that if you do high dose vitamin C along with high level sports, they might attenuate the response a bit, the training response, that's true. But when you're doing something like games, you're not doing Murph at games to make yourself stronger, you want to finish. Therefore, if vitamin C can actually make your adrenals, increase your ability to produce adrenaline and cortisol, and you want lots of that whilst you're going, because that's what's going to will keep you going, and then have levels come down faster afterwards to recover faster, would you want to try that? And studies have been done on human, not on simulated swimming until failure. Of course, no ethical committee would ever approve that, but at least from like mental stress, and the same picture seems to be appearing, although they're not massive studies, but that vitamin C dosed in somewhere between 2 and 3 grams per day for a large adult, divided in several doses, actually made people perform better under stress. Not massively, but slightly better, and also not feel as stressed, not feel as pressured mentally. So that could be worthwhile trying. Again, this is sort of extrapolating from animal research, some human studies, and no real sports studies have been done, but it's just an experience I've had myself and also several of my athletes have had. Also, afterwards, if they take vitamin C, some of them report, and whether it's placebo or physiological effect or both, that they don't feel as crushed and they get back to normal faster. Also, if they have trouble sleeping during competitions, not because of anxiety about what will happen, but because they're totally crushed, so they have this strange mix of being totally down and out, but at the same time also having a stress response and overdrive. Some of them report, hey, I feel better when I do this. So that could be a strategy worth trying. And also talking about pre and post supplementation, caffeine, as I mentioned, post Murph might actually be an idea along with carbs to shift glucose into your glycogen stores faster. But also remember, caffeine, when used judiciously, can extend the time till fatigue, and can also make you, extend time to fatigue and make you perform a bit better. So caffeine pre-Murph might work. However, there's a caveat. If you want true ergogenic effects of coffee, so you want coffee to actually make you perform above and beyond what you do from the caffeine, then you need to be caffeine naive. So if you have caffeine more than 2 times a week, you get this adaptation where you might mentally feel you're more on, but when you look at like pure physiologically, if you're a regular caffeine user, or maybe if you're a caffeine abuser, so you're using caffeine to save your sorry self when you're not properly rested and so forth, then you might feel a mental effect that you don't feel as tired, or you even feel more on fire than you literally are, but you probably won't get an enhanced ability to perform. Now, whether that mental feeling, because what caffeine does cognitively is that it actually blocks some of the messages that make you feel tired, so it doesn't necessarily make you less tired, but it blocks the signals in your brain that really tell you, okay, time to sleep or wind down now. And that on itself might have a beneficial effect, even if you're having caffeine regularly. Now, yeah, I think those are about my best recommendations for Murph. So hopefully this has given you some information you can use, either not right now at games if you're competing at games, or might be interesting for you to look at for games. Well, actually, I forgot something. That's good old me talking, trying to finish before I'm really done. Theoretically speaking, what could also help for something like Murph is anything that will either enhance oxygen delivery or elevate your lactate threshold or your ability to handle lactate. So obviously for improving oxygen delivery or oxygen utilization, beetroot juice and nitrates. So a lot of beetroot juice before something like Murph might just make a difference. Beetroot juice doesn't increase your maximum performance, but when you're going at a lower level, it seems to, again, extend the time to fatigue because the oxygen cost seems to be a bit lower, so you actually become a bit more efficient when you're not going full out guns blazing. So that could be beneficial along with caffeine and enough fluids. Of course, if you drink beetroot juice, that will give you fluids beforehand as well. And if you do use beetroot juice, you want to get it about 45 minutes, an hour before to get the maximum effect from the nitrate in the beetroot juice. The other thing is bicarbonate, right? Because one of the things you're going to feel something like Murph, apart from apart from energy depletion and fatigue, is that you will feel a lot of lactate building up, and that, at some point systemically becomes something that's uncomfortable and painful, but also will slow you down. So bicarbonate works, but the problem with bicarbonate is you need as much as half a gram of sodium bicarbonate per kilogram of body weight to get a really effective acid buffer. And that would mean that for the average games competitor, my guess is the men are about 75 kilograms. I'll give a few, so that 160 pounds, maybe a bit heavier than 75, but let's say 80 kilograms. Then you would need like 40 grams of bicarbonate. And if you take 40 grams of bicarbonate, you're probably going to get a pretty upset stomach. So theoretically, bicarbonate might work, but the problem is getting enough for it to work. If you start loading sequentially somewhat before, there are studies showing that if you take bicarbonate in smaller doses throughout the day for several days, that can also build up levels and might not give you as much digestive upset. And also, speaking of lactate buffering, maybe beta-alanine would work. So beta-alanine is an amino acid, and beta-alanine seems to enhance your lactate buffer and your acid buffer in your muscles. So bicarbonate works systemically in your bloodstream all over your body. Beta-alanine seems to work locally in your muscles, so when your muscles start burning from the accumulation of lactate in your upper body when you're doing pull-ups, or rather you're doing butterfly pull-ups, keeping pull-ups, and your upper body hurts when you're doing your push-ups, and your legs start hurting when you're doing your air squats with extra weight. Beta-alanine might work, but you can't start taking it now. So if you haven't started beta-alanine, it's too late now, because you really need to take it for several weeks before sufficient levels accumulate in your body to make a difference. So yeah, I think that would be my advice. Those were a few things to keep in mind and consider. So as I mentioned before, when I tried stopping too early or finishing my little talk here, hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've gotten beneficial information that you can put to use now or later, or just something that would be interesting for you to know as you're watching Murph and watching games and watching people do Murph at other times. And if this is of benefit, then I would love to help you more. As I mentioned, my name is Romaro Cadogan, also called the Danish Food Doctor, and I do help a lot of top CrossFitters. So you could get an individual one-to-one session if that's what you need. And I've also done this e-course called Sports Nutrition for CrossFitters, what to eat, what to drink, and what supplements to take to excel in CrossFit. So maybe that would be of interest, where you get plenty more information like this. And if that's of interest, then go on to my website and sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get the information. So if you're English speaking, that's umahro.com, umahro.com. If you're Danish, but you want the sports nutrition for CrossFit athletes part, then you have to sign up for my English newsletter as well, because I'm only doing this product in English. Anyway, thank you for your time and attention. Maybe see you at games, or I'll watch games with you. I'll definitely be there cheering on several of my athletes and doing a few other interesting things that you'll find out if you're physically at games.